learn how to handle the winters. That's obvious. The winters come right after falls. And pray tell how often? Every year, according to written history, for the last 6,500. To cross your fingers and say, I hope it doesn't come. I'm telling you, we call that naive. Now, there's all kinds of winters. Not just the winter of the season, but there's all kinds of winters. Winter time, the down time, the discouraging time. One writer called it the winter of discontent. The winter when you can't figure it out, the winter when it all goes wrong. Economic winters, social winters, political winters, and personal winters. When your heart is smashed in 1,000 pieces, the nights are unusually long. It's called winter time. Barbra Streisand sings, it used to be so natural to talk about forever, but used to be's don't count anymore. They just lay on the floor till we sweep them away. You don't sing me love songs. You don't say you need me, and you don't bring me flowers anymore. A song of winter. But hey, we're acquainted with all those winter scenarios. We've been through them all. Now the question is, what do you do about the winters? Well, you can't get rid of January by tearing it off the calendar. But here's what you can do with the upcoming winters of your life. The long ones, the short ones, the easy ones, the more difficult ones. Here's what you can do. Get wiser and stronger and better. Just make a list of that trio of good words. Wiser, stronger, and better. To challenge for yourself the upcoming winters of your life, don't you think you could read more? Pick up the scenario, pick up the books, pick up the cassettes. So I would put some stuff on cassettes so you can listen to it, put it in books so you can read it. Now putting it on video so you can see it. I'm telling you, anybody that wants to can get wiser. Next is stronger. Anybody can get stronger. If you're willing to do the push-ups, you can get stronger. If you're willing to put yourself through the paces, you can get stronger. Can you develop stronger skills? And the answer is yes. Start practicing. And you can get stronger. Can you get stronger in handling life situations? Of course. But you got to go to work on yourself. You can't blame out there wishing it was easier. Wish you were stronger. And here's the last one, get better. Anybody can get better. Language, we can all get better. I've been lecturing now for 33 years, and I'm telling you, today versus 33 years ago, I'm better. First time I gave a talk, I stood up, my mind sat back down. I've been through that whole deal. Opened my mouth, nothing came out for a while. My knees are banging together, the sweat's pouring off my face, I'm shaking like a leaf. It's called terror, in case you haven't tried it, those first attempts. But I'm telling you, I got through it, and I did it again, and I got through it, and I did it again, and I got through it. And now, of course, I can lecture for a few hours in one day. Anybody can get better. Develop the skills, okay? Handle the upcoming winters. Don't wish away the winters. That's called naive. Wish for the skills. Wish for the strength. Wish for the wisdom.
The hardest part about failing that people battle with is not necessarily the failure, it's the emotion attached to the failure. Because we come from, human beings are social creatures. So that's why you live with your family. You don't live alone. That's why you live in a society and a community. That's why you go to a church. That's why you go to an office. And everywhere you go, when you get there, there are other human beings. Human beings are social creatures. And a part of being a social creature is feedback. So you have the friends you have because you like the feedback. When you make a joke, they laugh. You go to the places you go to because you like the feedback. So as human beings, we're in a constant system of feedback. When you went to school, at the end of a term, you wrote a test or an exam for feedback. The hardest part about failing is you don't like the feedback because you don't know if you failed or if the business failed, because you are the business, you're the entrepreneur. And so you have to deal with these emotions attached to failure. And then what happens is you start questioning yourself. You start asking questions like, am I really as good as I think I am? Like, am I really this good? Or has it just been my ego this whole time? And then you go back to the time when there was a guy in high school who told you you'd amount to nothing. or an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend who told you that you would amount to nothing. And you go, maybe they were right. You know what's funny about human beings is if you wrote a test and you got 70%, your mind doesn't see the answers you got right. When you go through the exam paper after you get it back from your teacher, you look for the answers you got wrong. Because that's how we're wired as human beings. So if you have had 100 people tell you you're amazing and 3 people tell you you are useless, you will always remember the 3 people. It's what's called the imposter syndrome. So your internal dialogue starts being framed by negative perceptions of self, by self, based on the perceptions of others. So the real problem with failure is because it supports the 3 people who told you were worth nothing, not the 97 who told you you're amazing. So for me, that was like the hardest part, right? Like the hardest part was having to understand that I was not that failure, that the failure didn't define me, that it was a moment, it happened, and and I needed to move on from it. And that failing doesn't make you any less of what you were. You're still great, you're still amazing, you're still smart and intelligent and hardworking, you're still all of those things. All of those things about you are true. The event does not define you. It's just an event. You're an athlete that showed up to run a 100-meter race and had a bad race. Doesn't mean you're a bad athlete. You had a bad race, right? The reason that's important is because even today, as I run my businesses, it's like the part of the internal dialogue I have to catch myself having is recognize when I'm having a bad month and when I'm having a bad quarter. That I'm not bad. My business is not bad. The month was bad. The quarter was bad. But I'm not bad. Because if you become your failures, you'll never succeed. The problem though, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, is we become our successes. Every time you succeed, you own your success. When you write your Twitter profile, what do you put there? Your successes. When you write your CV, what do you put there? Your successes. You go for an interview and people say, tell me a bit about yourself. What do you tell them? Your successes. Someone says, tell me about yourself. You tell them about your successes because you come from a society where the success is you. So when you fail, you go, this failure must be me. It's not. It's an event.
Okay, so you don't see irrelevant things. That's most things. You do see things that move you forward, and you do see things that get in your way. And in the class of things that get in your way are indeterminate occurrences, novel or anomalous occurrences. And almost everything that gets in your way is in some sense a novel occurrence, because you usually structure your behavior so that you don't go anywhere where something wildly anomalous is likely to occur. So if you encounter an obstacle, 2 things happen at the same time, and one is that your movement forward to your specific goal or sets of goals is blocked. But the second thing that happens is you're faced with a mystery. And the mystery is, this thing wasn't supposed to exist, but it does exist. So what implication does that have for everything I think? And that's very, very hard on people. They do not like that at all. And no wonder, because it's the constrained chaos that's underneath everything, inhibited by your contextual knowledge, that suddenly popped its head up into your world. It's like the shark in the movie Jaws, which is of course a mythological story. It's exactly that, and it's exactly what that movie signified. A safe vacation paradise, all of a sudden threatened by some subterranean thing that can pull you down and that destroys the peace and the harmony of that particular community. It's a dragon story, it's a hero myth, it's the story that people have been telling forever. So, and what you can think of that thing that reemerges, that shark that rises up from the depths, or that whale, or that dragon, or that predator, or the foreign invader for that matter, or the barbarian. They all fit into the same category. That's what had been deemed irrelevant suddenly manifesting itself. And when you think about how much is deemed irrelevant, the fact that it suddenly manifests itself, that's exactly the purpose for the reason for the trauma. It's like, Well, I've eradicated from my conceptualizations 99.99% of everything. It's zeroed out. And all of a sudden I've made a mistake. Bang, I don't know where I am. Well, what's relevant when you don't know where you are? And the answer to that is, since you don't know, everything is relevant. And you can imagine the sort of terror that people who experience paranoid schizophrenia are living in perennially, because what happens to them is precisely that. They undergo neurophysiological transformations that makes everything that they once depended on disappear, and everything comes back as relevant. And that puts them in the early stages of schizophrenia. That's extraordinarily stressful neurophysiologically. So they're overwhelmed with cortisol, and their brains deteriorate as a consequence of that. It's just too much. So, and unsurprisingly, right? Because you can hardly deal with anything, let alone with everything. Now, and often what you see, and it's rarely conceptualized this way in the training of clinical therapists, but often what you see when you are dealing with people who are in crisis isn't people who have a mental illness. In fact, in my experience, that's actually quite rare. What's far more common is that the person that you're talking to has become overwhelmed by catastrophe. So their life has fallen apart in some way that makes what they're doing actually impossible. So maybe someone very close to them in their family that they were depending on has developed a very serious illness, and that's thrown their entire financial state into utter chaos. Or maybe they've developed a condition that makes it impossible for them to work. Or, you can imagine the potential range of catastrophes. And they're coming to see you because they're anxious and depressed, but the reason they're anxious and depressed is because everything they have ignored has popped its head back up and is hell-bent on their destruction. And often you see people who are being attacked by 5 or 6 of these monsters at the same time. And it isn't their mental illness that stops them from being able to deal with it, although that, whatever weaknesses you have are going to interfere. It's the fact that what they're facing is no damn joke, and if you were facing it, you'd feel exactly the same way. So then you're trying to come up with practical solutions to these tremendously complex problems. And that's it's extraordinarily difficult, generally speaking. People often don't come to a therapist until they've exhausted their entire range of resources. They cannot figure out what to do. And so, in a situation like that, you can administer antidepressants, and maybe that'll help the person increase their stress resistance. But and it may be that because they're depressed and have been brought down, that they are in fact exaggerating the danger of some of the smaller monsters that are after them. But making the person more stress resilient doesn't give them, for example, a new job, and it certainly doesn't bring back the person they've been living with for 2 years who has a degenerating neurological disease or some form of cancer. Like, these things are major. I often see people who, they're in a relationship, maybe they're rather isolated, older people. One of the partners is dying and their entire financial situation has become catastrophic. It's like, that's not a mental illness, man. I mean, they may have got into that situation because of one inadequacy or another, but you don't even want to push that too far, because that sort of thing can happen to anyone, and will, in fact, happen to most people in one form or another, at least at some point in their lives. So you want to be damn prepared for that. You want to be prepared for that, because it's bitter and harsh and anxiety-provoking and painful. But if you're not ready, then it's also hell. And often you can stop things from becoming hell, even though you can't stop them from being bitter and painful and anxiety-provoking and all of that. You can at least delimit the catastrophe enough so that it doesn't permanently bring you and the people around you down. And that's not so bad, right? That's a hell, or at least it's a lot better than the alternative. So this is the problem, things object, things are obstacles. Well, how big is the obstacle? It's the same question as how big is the predator that's lurking outside the door of our cave. It's exactly the same problem, except conceptualized abstractly. And I would say exactly the same systems that your distant ancestors used to conceptualize the lurking predator are the systems that are activated now when you encounter the re-emergence of all the monsters that you've ignored.
There's a beautiful poem by Rudyard Kipling called If. And it's part of the poem where he says, it's my favorite part of the poem. He says, if you can meet victory and defeat and treat both imposters just the same, then you be a man. Because what he's saying is victory and defeat are both imposters. They are not you. They're events external of you. But you have to treat them just the same. Never let them define you. Don't let them move your core, you know? It's like, what's funny about failing, I think, is you learn more from failing often than you do from succeeding. One of the challenges of living in the world today is people have an opinion about everything. It's a real problem. Like, it's a real problem. Somebody who doesn't live your reality, who doesn't face your problems, who doesn't know what you're going through, but wants to comment. You know, I was trying to explain this to someone. I was like, if you were absent in my struggle, please don't be present in my success. But also don't be present in my failure. I get an only upset. Be upset. So we live in this era today where people lack context. So Tandanani starts a business and the business fails. People don't go, why did it fail? What happened? They just go, Jenlenati is a failure, right? I can't remember, somebody sent me a meme, it was beautiful. They said, you'll never be criticized by somebody working more than you. So, and that's a point, I think, to anybody watching this video. Before you leave a comment, just ask yourself, are you working more than you? Because anybody can leave a comment. It's easy. You have an internet connection, you watch a video, you go and you comment, this guy talks too much. Okay, but are you working? And, you know, at the end of it all, when they tally the work I've put in, the work you put in, who's going to put in more work? For me, that's what's important. What's important is, did you put in the work? Did you do the hours? Did you give it the best you